When former special counsel Jack Smith testified publicly for the first time this week, the American people got to hear for themselves directly from the man who has long claimed to have found proof beyond a reasonable doubt that President Trump engaged in criminal acts.
Our investigation revealed that Donald Trump was not looking for honest answers about whether there was fraud in the election. He was looking for ways to stay in power. And when people told him things that conflicted with him staying in power, he rejected them, or he chose not even to contact people like that who would know if the election was done properly in the state.
For all the attacks made by Republicans on the House Judiciary Committee, few actually tried to challenge the facts of the criminal cases and instead focused on technical and procedural aspects of the probe and claims that the investigation was all just part of a weaponized Justice Department solely focused on going after Trump. Perhaps the irony was lost on those Republicans that during the hearing and afterwards, Trump lashed out on social media again, calling Smith a, quote, deranged animal, and calling on his attorney general to go after Smith, as well as, quote, some of the crooked and corrupt witnesses that he was attempting to use in his case against me. Joining us now, Congressman Dan Goldman of New York, a member of the House Judiciary Committee. Congressman Goldman, great to see you. Thank you for coming to the weekend. I want to play a little bit more from the hearing, and this is an incredibly concise back and forth between Congresswoman Jayapal and Jack Smith on the 2020 election interference investigation. Watch this.
Did he pressure DOJ officials to stop the certification of the election?
He did.
Did he pressure his own vice president, Mike Pence, to stop the certification against the oath of office that he had sworn to the Constitution?
He did.
And when all of this didn't work, did he, Donald Trump, motivate and inspire an angry mob to the U.S. Capitol to stop the certification?
Our proof showed that he caused what happened on January 6th, that it was foreseeable, and that he exploited that violence.
Did Donald Trump know that his allegations of election fraud were lies when he spread them?
Our proof was that he did, and we intended to prove that at trial.
So, Congressman, I wanted to play that because Jack Smith made it clear in his pithy answers the evidence that he had and what he was going to bring to bear. And I'm just wondering, what do you make given that your Republican colleagues' insistence that the investigation he conducted was part of some so-called weaponization of the Justice Department?
No, it was, we're almost in la-la land every time the Republicans took over. They were focused on such random and petty tangential things, laced with all these huge accusations with no proof whatsoever. And I thought the real value of Jack Smith appearing in public, which I had been pushing for quite some time, is that you got to see that exchange with my colleague, Congresswoman Jayapal. And I asked him a little bit for him to go into more depth about what kind of evidence that he had that Donald Trump knew full well that the election was not stolen. And he had a long litany of all sorts of different kinds of witnesses. But what you really saw from this very, very staid, measured, calm career prosecutor is that there's no way in the world that this guy was leading a politicized investigation. He is a 30-year career prosecutor. He made it very clear he never discussed this investigation with President Biden. The White House never received any instructions from anyone else, made the decision himself. So you're left to watch that 6 hours of the hearing and say, okay, is this the partisan hack? Or is it the guy on Twitter calling him deranged and insulting the witnesses and threatening the witnesses? Is that the partisan that all these Republicans are just kowtowing to?
Yeah, Congressman, I was covering that Biden White House, and there were a lot of Democrats who were upset that there wasn't more of a thumb on the scale on when they didn't push the DOJ to do anything. But President Biden and Merrick Garland, their attorney general at the time, stayed out of it. This is not the only investigation that he launched into Donald Trump. There's also the classified documents case. And I want to read something from Friday. The DOJ court filing seeking to keep his documents report sealed. Jack Smith investigation, this is from them, was unlawful from its inception. Smith not only weaponized the Department of Justice against a leading presidential candidate in pursuit of an anti-democratic end, but he did so without legal authority and while targeting constitutionally protected activity. It is the position of the Attorney General and this department that release of Volume 2 is unjustified. The illicit product of an unlawful investigation and prosecution belongs in the dustbin of history. Even if Judge Cannon, Eileen Cannon, lifts her injunction on this, it would seemingly be up to the Attorney General to publicly release Volume 2. What are you and Democrats, because I don't think the Republicans are going to do it, so what are you and your Democratic colleagues thinking ahead on how to make sure that the American people see what is in this document, even if the Attorney General doesn't want it to be out in public?
Well, it'll be the Epstein Files Part 2. And certainly they handpicked that judge who has issued some of the most outrageous opinions of any district judge I've ever seen. You want to talk about someone who's a partisan. So it very well may be that she comes up with some bogus reason why it can't be released, in which case it'll be appealed and it'll take longer. But assuming she does the right thing, because there's absolutely no reason why Volume 2 should not be released, then it does go to the Attorney General, who has foreshadowed that she will not release them. That is unacceptable. Every special counsel report in history has been released to Congress. Jack Smith should be no different, and it should be no different just because Donald Trump was the subject of the investigation. He lucked out tremendously because the charges were dismissed, so he didn't actually have to face them in trial. But he should not get a windfall now that because he doesn't have to face them in trial, they shouldn't be out in public. There's a tremendous public interest to understand what exactly he did in putting all those classified documents in his bathroom and then refusing over and over and over to turn them back to the government where they belong. And he discussed them with other people, including potentially nuclear secrets. I mean, this is really serious stuff that the American people needs to understand, and they just continue with cover-up after cover-up after cover-up.
Congressman, in the case that we do ultimately see this report as soon as February 24th, that's the date that was agreed upon for the release, if this appeal doesn't happen, spoiler alert for anyone who didn't watch the 5 hours of Jack Smith's testimony, you and your colleagues ended the hearing with a point of order requesting that Jack Smith return before Congress to testify and answer questions about the report. Are you certain that this is a good idea, especially since we saw Trump truth socialing throughout the hearing, basically demanding that Pam Bondi be watching it and pursue criminal charges against Jack Smith? Is it a good idea for him to put himself at risk again of charges like perjury potentially, or whatever Trump administration officials want to grasp onto to hold against him?
Jack Smith is a true American patriot. He indicated and testified and has said repeatedly he will not be intimidated. And like a true good prosecutor who does the work and doesn't worry about the consequences, he will certainly not change his framework or his view because of Donald Trump's continued threats, which are really at this point just superfluous because he's been doing it so much. And yes, the answer is it is necessary for it to come out.
So he's already indicated to you that he's willing to testify again.
I don't think any of us on the Judiciary Committee has specifically spoken about it, but I can assure you that he will be not afraid or intimidated to come back and to speak about his work. During the deposition that we had in closed door and at the hearing on Thursday, we tried to ask him about Volume 2, and repeatedly he said because of the court order, he could not speak about it. I am confident he will come back in and speak about it, and he will not be deterred by Donald Trump's increasingly deranged threats. The other thing I would note, Jackie, that was really kind of chilling was when Jack Smith described the types of threats that Donald Trump made against witnesses during this investigation, which prompted the gag order. Now, the Republicans, of course, were claiming, oh, the gag order is to silence him during a campaign. Donald Trump was literally threatening to kill or to have killed witnesses. That is the worst witness intimidation you can imagine. And so for him to then claim, oh, it's my First Amendment right to threaten to kill people, especially after January 6th, where we know what his words mean and are interpreted as, was very, very bone-jarring.
Congressman Dan Goldman will be on the lookout for Volume 2. Thanks so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you.